Well, good morning, everybody. How y'all doing this morning? Guess we're still getting this shot right. Man, good coffee's good coffee. Okay, today we're going to talk about a comment. Um, I'm just going to share it. So we're talking about, I think people were still talking kind of about this Harley Benton thing. How awesome they are and stuff, because they are, obviously. Um, and I was having a conversation with a couple of guys in the comments, and somebody said that he said, I'm going to just read this. The context is we're talking about whether uh, Harley Benton owner feels that the guitar is superior to something else or not, because I feel like that's what happens a lot of times. But maybe that's an exaggeration. So let's give them credit. Maybe that's just an exaggeration. So I really like this. This gentleman says, they don't drone on about the superiority. They insist on their equivalent quality to much more expensive brand guitars. That's parity, not superiority, and it's basically objectively true. The reason these guitars are cheaper than the costing structure the reason these guitars are cheaper is the costing structure, not the manufacturing or materials. Okay, and I said, this is not possible. I understand where you're coming from with this, but it's actually not possible. Math is math. Okay, so and then somebody said, I agree with you. I just wish you would explain why. So I'm like, okay, well, let me put some time into preparing this. So I did. I put quite a bit of time last night into kind of trying to put this together in a way that kind of makes some sense. And let's be constructive about this. Okay, so I'm not saying anything is bad. The common claim is cheap guitars are so good now that they're just the same as expensive. They're just as good as, guys. They're just as good as these more expensive guitars. There's a small truth in that inexpensive guitars have gotten very, very good. In fact, I think folks hear me wrong when we talk about this. Like, I don't disagree, right? The only thing I disagree about, is that the parity part. Because the parity means that they're the same. They can be compared as the same. And they're not. They just can't be. A Gibson is better, objectively. And that whole thing about parts versus pricing structure is just false. So I'm just going to say it like that so that it's very clear, and we're going to get into the particulars of it, okay? Now, that being said, the inexpensive instrument will play good. It might sound good. It might look attractive. It might stay in tune. It might do all the things that you want it to do. It might record well. You might gig with it, okay? So it might serve your purposes totally. And after we go through this whole explanation of the difference between how a cheap guitar is manufactured and the cost-cutting measures and all that kind of stuff, you might say in the end, well, none of that matters to me, and the guitar functions perfectly fine, and I like what I have. And I will always play cheap guitars, and I'm a Harley Benton fanboy for life. There's nothing wrong with that, absolutely, and I think it's awesome, okay? And you should love what you love, and I'm not here to say anything against it. What I want to do is inform about how guitars are made. You can take the information and you can do what you will with it, and I will not judge you for it. But the folks that say that all this stuff is the same are just wrong. Okay? And so we're just going to talk about that. There's a difference between saying a guitar does everything I need it to do and the path of diminishing returns is not worth it to me, and they're samesies. Okay? That's totally different. Parity is not possible. And the reason is math. The reason is basic economics that I guess they don't teach in school anymore. It might be just as useful to you. You might love it, but it's not the same. It's not built the same way. It's not the same. And what you're going to find is, well, everybody's got a CNC machine, so it's all the same. Is not true. And in fact, it has very little to do with this entire thing that we're going to talk about. Okay. So first of all, let's present the $250, $300, $350 guitar in that price range. I'm going to use $250 because a lot of those inexpensive guitars are right around that. That $250 does not go to building that guitar. Okay. So materials, components, factory labor, factory overhead. We're talking about just the factory. Factory profit, because they got to make money. Packaging, freight, importation costs, tariffs, all that kind of stuff. Warehousing, okay, so you got to rent the building to put it in. Website operation, payment processing, customer service, returns. We're going to get into the particulars of that in a minute. This is very thorough, by the way. Warranty claims, retail operating costs, depending on the price structure, and there will always be retail operating costs. We're going to get into that. And then in the case of Harley Benton, Thomann needs to make a profit on all of this. Okay. So because of that long list of things that are all still present with the Harley Benton, the actual manufacturing cost for the guitar, the budget, is substantially below that $250 mark. It's got to be somewhere in the $75 range, okay, for this to work. So I don't know where you think you can get a guitar made for $75 on a consistent basis, but that is crazy, okay? So do you think reasonably as a human being that a guitar can be manufactured for $75 or $100 that is equivalent to a $3,000 instrument? Do you think that? Because if you do, it might behoove you to do some research on economics. Okay, so we're going to dive into this. You don't even need to know if it's $75 to $100 to understand that there's limitations to those things, right? You have to set limitations to hit those numbers because everybody along the way has got to get paid. Okay. How much guitar could you build for $250 and retail it and sell it and make a living? And how many of those would you have to make? This budget has to be so highly controlled to pull off that every penny along the way needs to be pinched and looked at. Okay? So the guitar does not cost $250 to make. The entire transaction on the customer end costs you $250. That's a big, big difference. So first of all, get that in your head that this is a huge deal. Okay. Now, the very first place people are going to come to, and they're going to say, well, the factory direct thing, because they don't have dealers, it's vertically integrated to Thomann. Okay. You're right. They do cut out a middleman there. Okay. But Harley Benton is not factory direct. Okay. They're made by, and I was corrected on this. They do have some, actually Court does make some of their stuff in Indonesia. So thank you for pointing that out. Some stuff in China. So what they do is they own the brand. So all the naming, the branding. They commission the product. They import the product to Europe. They warehouse the product. They photograph the product. They operate the website. They process the payments. They handle customer service. They manage all the returns. They provide warranty support. And they ship the order to you. So Thomann is the retailer. The retailer has not disappeared. It's just vertically integrated. They've consolidated it to get rid of some things. So what is actually removed here? Distribution. Typically in between there is a distributor. And in Europe, it's actually more prevalent in different ways than it is in the United States. But there's a separate distributor that distributes multiple brands. We have them in the United States too, but some of it's structured a little differently. There's usually an entire independent wholesale layer that gets probably 40% of the profit of a guitar. The outside sales representative that goes with that. And then you have 30%. Well, it's probably about, actually, I take that back. It's probably 30 to 40 and then 10 to 15 to the distributor, something like that. It's about 10 to 15 actually to the distributor. And then there's duplicated inventory, when you have a distributor, because then you have the factory, right? Then you have to the distributor, then you have to the retailer, right? So there's there's lots of things that are duplicated in processes, if not in money. So they've kind of pulled that out, but this doesn't make any of that free. They've just taken it on. They've taken it in. So they still have the cost of doing it. So it does not eliminate the middleman. They just brought it under one roof. Okay. And that means that part of that is good. Part of that is, helpful. And part of that is helpful with the cost. Now let's talk about the dealer network, because a lot of times, because the dealer network, which is in this case Thomann, but most of other companies have dealers all over. Now they can have local inventory. You can try it before you buy it. They have typically, unless they suck, knowledgeable salespeople. We're talking about a good retail here. You can do exchanges. You can often finance. You can get a setup done in-house. You can get repairs done. You can compare with other products, on the spot. You can do all those things. Local customer service, and of course, community support and lessons and all those things, right? But the dealer has to buy the guitar before you buy it. And so there is a cost incurred there. They pay the rent, they pay their employees, they pay insurance. They run an entire other business outside of the actual guitar manufacturing and outside. They have nothing to do with the brand. They are running a separate business, but they handle returns and all that kind of stuff. And they got to handle flooring costs and all that, which is a whole nother financing thing we could get into that I don't think a lot of people realize, but there's flooring costs for all that stuff. So there's a whole bunch of expenses in it, right? This is why I don't own this is why I don't own a brick and mortar store, because I don't want those expenses. Now, you as a customer may decide, I don't want to pay for any of that, and I just want to order from Thomann or somebody like that and skip all that. Cool. That's great. It makes sense, right? We do that to save money. I'll buy factory direct or, more or less, for watches and pocket knives and stuff. It makes sense because but usually when you buy factory direct, like, for example, when you buy factory direct from us, it's retail. Like, it's still the same price typically. But all those services have real costs that have to be supported. That's why we still charge retail at DylanTalksTone, because I have to now support all that stuff, right? I have to take the time to do all that. So you can remove the dealer, but we haven't with Thomann. We've removed the distributor. But by doing that magically does not make the guitar from $3,000 to $300. There's too many other differences along the way. It has nothing to do, or very little to do. It's probably 10 or 15% of the cost of the retail cost of the guitar that is now removed with the retailer. So you can decide not to value that as you go through this entire process and continue to rationalize. And I don't mean rationalize in a bad way, but I just mean think it through and decide to not value certain things as we go. But the first thing is dealer support. So you got to cross that off your list if you're going to buy a $300 guitar, typically. Now let's talk about labor. Everybody wants to talk about hourly wages and the country that it's made in and that kind of stuff. That's fine. We can talk about that, but let's not, because we know that that's just an ad nauseum thing. Let's talk about the hours, the minutes, the amount of minutes that it takes to build a guitar. Okay, because this is where we're going to see a huge difference in the amount of minutes that it takes to make a guitar. Okay, and what you're going to notice here is no machines. So what if it took 5 more minutes of sanding, What if it took 5 more minutes of fret dressing to get it a little better? What if it took 5 more minutes of nut work? What if it took 5 more minutes of polishing on the finish so that the finish was better? What if it took 5 more minutes of setup? What if it took 5 more minutes at the final inspection at the end of the guitar? That's 30 extra minutes that we just talked about to make a guitar. Doesn't seem like a lot. Just get it right. 30 extra minutes. 1,000 guitars, 500 labor hours. 100,000 guitars, 50,000 labor hours. 50,000 labor hours a year is 25 employees. Okay? So adding 30 minutes to a guitar is 25 employees. Every minute, about a minute and a half, that you add to a guitar, you're adding another employee. About a minute and a half when you're looking at that scale. So you're looking at these big Chinese factories and these big, right? So you're adding a minute and a half or so at that volume, you're adding another employee. Now, when you're building at smaller volume, like Gibson is not building that many guitars, so then the number gets bigger. So 1 minute adds more employees because you're building less guitars at a time. So the volume comes down, the employee needs actually go up because it's just the way the math works. So you need more people per guitar when you slow it down. Okay. And then plus it's in the United States, the whole labor cost, we can get into all that. So a budget factory like Harley, the ones that do like court and stuff, they have to decide, does this operation need to happen? Can it happen faster? Can we automate it? Can the tolerances be widened? Meaning, do we want it this good? Or can it be somewhere in between here and here? Can the dealer or the customer do that instead of us? Will most buyers notice the difference if we widen our tolerances? This is cost-targeted manufacturing. This is not quality-targeted manufacturing. This is cost-targeted manufacturing, which is what these companies do. So what that means is you have a guitar that has wider tolerances and more inconsistent quality, but it is cheaper to make. Some place like PT Court has a product line that they have an assembly line over here, and people will refuse to accept this. Go watch Phil McKnight's video series on this. They have this production line that has very tight tolerances, and the guitars are $3,500. And they have this production line, and it has very loose tolerances, less quality, lower quality everything, and those guitars are $300. So they can make a choice about the cost-targeted manufacturing across their own product line to accommodate these inexpensive instruments. Affordable guitars are made by saving minutes, hundreds of thousands of times, not by finding one cheaper thing like wood or something. Okay? That's the deal. The other thing with this is work experience. An experienced worker, like at PRS or at Gibson, can understand wood grain. They can, PRS, they pick every top and body that goes together and they put them in sets, and like they had to pay somebody to do that. And he's got to know what he's doing. They can understand as they're going through the factory, they can look at the humidity and know what's going on and all kind of stuff. There's a lot of expert crap that goes into that, where in one of these high production facilities, they just don't have that stuff. So you're going to miss more, and the quality of manufacture on the fundamental side, as far as the wood and all that kind of stuff, is going to be a lot looser, which trickles down to setup stability and that kind of stuff later on. So simplifying operations is going to be the number one thing that these companies are going to do. But it is not the same labor model as somebody like Gibson, who says we're going to largely stick to our traditional way of making a guitar. that we've been doing for years and years and years, because this is our brand. Our brand is the tradition. Somebody like Harley Benton's like, let's take that look and that design and that overall aesthetic, and let's figure out how to make it really fast and really cheap. The goal of somebody like Gibson or Fender is, we're Gibson and Fender, so we're going to do it Gibson and Fender way, which is more expensive because there's more minutes. There's more minutes per cycle time of guitar. It's just not the same labor model, which is totally fine. And it has nothing to do with the country at this point. We're literally talking about the labor model. We're talking about how the company addresses the processes that make the guitar. Okay. Now let's talk about material selection, because we're not talking about tone wood here. Okay. We're talking about material selection. A more expensive guitar is going to reject more material. First of all, they're going to pay more. Paul Reed Smith, Breedlove, Martin. I know because my friend actually sells wood, and actually mills wood, has a mill in Fiji for Martin and some other companies and stuff. And it starts all the way back where the tree comes from, right? So they pay a guy. He's a friend of mine. His name is Mike. They pay a guy to literally fly around the world and find great wood, to work with the government in that country, to install a sawmill. And this guy literally is like, okay, this wood is awesome. It's going to be stable by the time you get it. It's going to come from this kind of tree. We're going to select it. It's going to be awesome. And by the time you get it, it's going to be good. And they follow that process all the way through. And then PRS, for example, gets that. And then they have their own climate controlled stuff that they do. You've seen the tours on YouTube where they put the wood in and it sits there for a certain amount of time. And then they got a guy that like picks all the stuff. They like put tons of work into it. Well, what does that give you? It gives you an incredibly stable instrument with a lot less flaws. Gibson actually chooses different mahogany for the SG versus for the Les Paul. It's like actually different wood. It's both mahogany, but they select it differently for different guitars. They put a lot of work into it. The one thing that these cheap guitars won't have is all of that. They'll just take a piece of wood off a pile. Okay. And you can even see it at the PT Court factory, where the wood selection for the more expensive guitars is a completely different process. It's like the cheap guitars got the leftover stuff almost. That wood is less stable inherently. That wood is going to give you more fret sprout in a neck. That wood is going to, over time, it's just not going to be as stable. Now, it might be stable enough for you, and it's totally fine. I'm just saying there's a difference between that and how a more expensive guitar is done. When we talk about hardware, and I know a lot of people don't want to talk about this, but the cost is the cost is the cost. Metallurgy is a thing, okay? So, this is Magna Cut steel, stainless steel, right? If you go to like VG10 stainless steel, it's about a third of the price of this. And it's different. It performs different. You got to sharpen it more. It's softer, right? That's a real difference. And it's a real cost difference. So the screws that you use on a Gibson or a Fender, an American one, the bridges, the plating, the chrome plating, the nickel plating. Now, my friend Steve, his real name is Steve, owns the company that does all the plating for Gibson. I've been there. I've toured it. I've seen how it's done. It's in Nashville. It's really crazy amazing, actually. I buy a lot of my hardware from him, too. That's different. That's real. That is a cost. So the quality of the nickel, the quality of the machining, the plating defects, malformed components, the cheap pot metal that comes on even an Epiphone sometimes. And then we get into electronics. Okay, the quality of electronics. My Harley Benton was awesome after I spent a bunch of money replacing all of the electronics. We don't even need to get into that. You know the difference there. And it might sound great. You might love it the way it came. It's totally fine. I'm just saying there is a difference. My buddy he does R&D for pickups for Gibson. He's a professional. He's been doing it for many, many years, and there's a whole department there. And it might sound like, well, they just have another humbucker come out, but they actually have a guy there and a team of people that like literally works on all that stuff and make sure that the products that they use for all of that is consistent. Like it's a super big deal. When companies reject parts, when they have returns, they got to pay for all that. They already bought the parts. You know, when a company sorts pots and throws a bunch away, they already paid for them. Somebody's got to absorb that cost. Cheap guitar companies don't do that stuff. Rejected parts still cost money, and it's spread across all of it. I mean, it's just how it is. Premium manufacturers will often have narrower acceptance standards for everything: weight, the appearance of the grain, the moisture content of the wood, color matching, even of grains and wood and stuff, cosmetic flaws, dimensional variation of metal parts as well as wood, and component performance. We talk about pots and caps and switches and stuff. Budget manufacturer oftentimes is going to have a much broader range about what they can accept. I mean, it just is what it is. Higher standards make a guitar more expensive. They just do. And every rejected guitar or every redo costs money as well. Quality inspection and consistency to get there also costs money. And the skill that it takes to do that. If you have a person in a factory who's like, yep, looks like a guitar, it's shiny, everything's cool, and they throw it in a box, that's different than actually going through the thing. If an inspection takes 2 or 3 minutes, just a visual 2 or 3 minute inspection of, from 3 feet away and everything looks awesome versus actually like a whole going through check, costs money. And here's the thing is that, here's what'll happen is they'll let the return policy catch all the fails. Which just is worse, which is kind of what these cheap guitar companies do. I mean, I've heard as high as 50-50 you're going to get a good one or not. Which just sucks. That's ridiculous. And then it's harder to have it supported like we talked about earlier. And you might say, well, no, I got a great one. Okay. If you got a great one, that's good. But that proves that they can make a good guitar, but it doesn't tell us how often. It doesn't tell us what the variation. It doesn't tell us how many customers selected, fixed problems that they should have returned. And it doesn't tell us how consistent the next 1,000 will be, right? The problem is that those inexpensive guitars don't force people to do that. When you buy a $3,000 Gibson, if you get it and it's not right, just return it. Make them fix it, right? But for some reason, financially, we did a video about this last week, financially, people just don't feel like it's necessary to speak up about a cheap guitar, and you should. You should not treat those differently. If you buy a new product, it should be new. End of story. Another expense is warranty. Return shipping, what to do with the B stock, all that stuff. You either pay to prevent problems or you budget to deal with the problems that come after the sale. I think Harley Benton has figured out that they just throw them away, which is also a cost, but in this model, it's just a disposable thing at this point. Engineering is another thing. People say, well, once the guitar is designed, it's designed, but that's not the case. In order to be consistent, you have to constantly be engineering because materials change, wood supplies change, all that stuff changes. Every time we open a roll of pickup wire, we have to make small adjustments and make sure for consistency purposes even the way we wind a pickup at the beginning of a roll versus at the end of a roll, we have to make small adjustments. There's always small little engineering changes to maintain consistency. But a cheap guitar company will just take shit off the shelf and put it on your guitar. That's what they'll do. That's how they do it. That's why you can reduce the cost. Finishing, fretwork, all that stuff. Cycle time, keeping it down. Cycle time, cycle time, cycle time, cycle time. Less finish prep, less touch up, less everything, less inspection. Finish is a big deal. People think, well, lacquer finish versus urethane finish, blah, blah. But you have to completely, what people don't realize is that when you make a change like a finish, it completely changes how the guitar starts at the beginning all the way to the end. Okay? Because that goes all the way back to sanding, it goes all the way back to prep, it goes all the way back to that stuff, and it changes the cycle time of the guitar, which is rules everything. Cycle time rules everything. And so it also affects factory space. So if you were painting with urethane and a guitar takes X amount of minutes to dry, for example, versus a lacquer guitar that needs to sit around for a certain amount of time, now you have more floor space. Now you have more building space. You have more square footage because it occupies that much more space. And the tracking systems and all that kind of stuff. The working capital, because you're literally talking about rent. You're talking about more utilities. You're talking about more everything when the process takes longer, when the guitar has to sit around for longer. Fast finishes are cheaper, not because of the materials, but because of the cycle time and the space that it takes to complete them in the factory. It makes them much more efficient, and it doesn't make them bad. They're great. I'm just saying they're different. Remember, everything we're talking about here is not better or worse because there's choices that are great for everything. We're talking about different. These things are done different, and you cannot deny it. Like, if you do, you're an idiot, to be honest with you. But you cannot deny it. Fretwork. Time is expensive. Fret wire is not. Okay? Again, stainless, not all the same. Cheap stainless is cheap stainless. So if you have a stainless steel fret guitar for $300, it's crap stainless. We did a video about it. It's crap stainless. It's actually barely, if at all, harder than good nickel frets. So just because it says it has stainless frets isn't some magic thing. Okay? Just FYI. That performance jump is expensive. It's expensive because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of time. And then the final setup. Cheap guitars are rarely given any time. And I don't mean final setup as in setup for you. I just mean the safety setup that's put on the guitar is even way crazy. And these are not weighted numbers. So we talk about diminishing returns. Don't forget that you're not paying 10 times more for 10 times the performance of an instrument. You're paying heavily for the final few percentage points of performance. So you're right about the diminishing returns, but people forget that those last few points are what is expensive, right? Hardware, we talked about hardware a little bit. Metallurgy, die-cast tuners versus nickel stuff. These parts are not the same. They don't come from the same place. They're not the same quality. They just aren't. Durability, thread quality, tolerances, smoothness, supplier consistency is a big one because a lot of these cheap companies basically do everything on bids. And so you've seen this before with like Squires and stuff where depending on where it's made, the parts will be a little different. The bodies will be cut a little different. The hardware will be a little different on inexpensive guitars from run to run because it's basically just bidded out supplier crap, right? So it has nothing to do with what the product is going to be in the end. It's, again, you're manufacturing to a cost. That's all it is. And so what Thoman's doing is they're negotiating low component prices and low factory prices to get to a number. They probably don't care what it is, really, as long as it looks the way they want it to look and it has the basic design they want it to have in the end. Economics of shipping, that's a whole nother thing that we could get into. And you're going to say, well, they both have to do it. Yes, they do both have to do it. But the way they handle their inventory and their cycle times and their cash flow is different. Absolutely different. Centralizing inventory and taking the distributor out does make a difference. But there are trade-offs to that for the final customer. Don't forget that a guitar sitting in a warehouse costs money, whether it's in Thoman's warehouse or whether it's in Gibson's warehouse, right? So how does Harley Benton do it? Let's talk about it. Or any of these other small brands, but we're talking about Harley Benton, okay? First, they choose a region that's cheaper to manufacture in. They have a super high production volume that most people don't match. They have modern equipment. They have standardized components across the brand so that it's cheaper, so they can buy more, shared platforms, all that kind of stuff. Huge purchase orders, centralized inventory, less distribution. They can control retailer margins. And honestly, less quality control so that they can have you accept inconsistency between instruments, because that happens. Okay. Now, I don't want to say that this is an accusation to them. It's actually a pretty crazy achievement. It's pretty incredible that they can do this, right? It's pretty incredible. The impressive part of this is that not that they've eliminated costs and made a $3,000 guitar for $300, is that they've figured out what you want and what you're willing to pay for if you're the consumer for this product. Price to performance value, they're incredible, right? They are. It's crazy. And they might give you what you want for a low fraction of the price of like a Gibson or something. Which is good. I mean, that's good. And if after hearing all this, you're like, yeah, that's exactly what I want. Excellent. Then you are the customer for this guitar. They've done their job and they've done it well. And that guitar will be useful to you and it'll be awesome, which is great. That's what we want. There's nothing negative about this. It's not the same. It's not the same. A Gibson has higher quality components. It has higher quality wood. It has higher quality pickups. It has higher quality everything. Okay? And say what you want about Gibson quality control, and you can get in the comments and rant and rave about all that you want. But the bottom line is they have people working on this. And their method of distributing a product and their goal of their existence is to have a legacy product that has been around for years, that is done kind of the old-fashioned way. Of course, they brought some modern stuff into it, but it's kind of the old-fashioned way. And that's what they like and that's what they want. And it costs more to do it. And the guitars are not the same. They're not just as good as, they're just not. You can look at the metallurgy of a piece of hardware. You can look at the wood selection. You can look at all that stuff. It's more expensive. It's harder to do. It takes longer. Not even talking about United States manufacturing. It's harder to do. It takes longer. And it's more expensive. Not even talking about where it's made. The process itself makes a better guitar. Whether those things are important to you or not, that's irrelevant to the actual math and the economics of the situation. I know this was long. Hope you enjoyed it.